It is my honor to introduce my first guest, Mrs. Violeta Bulc. Mrs. Bulc, you've worked as a CEO, you've been Deputy Prime Minister of Slovenia. Now you are working as European Union's Commissioner for Transportation. In a very simple word, this would mean that you are responsible for all transportation policy in Europe. Now, the world isn't quite as simple,
No.
So maybe before we start going into content, could you introduce the audience a bit on what European responsibilities are in this context versus the nation states, and maybe lead in with your priorities over the past four years?
Well, do we have the whole day? I thought we only have 20 minutes. But first of all, let me just say a big thank you to my dear friend Jean-Claude, because this is a perfect way how to start the conversation as well, because we joined forces, and this is the key message. If we want to succeed in this high tech, if we want to succeed as European Union and every single member state within, we need to work together. And what we were able to achieve with the joint efforts in the field of road safety is something to learn from. And I can only bow to Jean-Claude and his incredible dedication on a United Nations level to really bring the world together. And EU here is an inspiration, right, Jean?
I mean, you know, as everybody knows, I've been used to run teams, mainly in motor racing. Now it's a different way of running a team, probably more challenging. But as Violeta says, we need to bring people together. You know, and that's why in my speech I was mentioning about global organization, but also private sector. And I will say it's a job of all of us, all of you, because each member of the society is a road user, and each one has a responsibility. So I think it's unfair, I mean, to give only the responsibility to the politics, to the governments, because it's our problem, and it's our challenge to make sure that we have less victims on the roads, and it has happened.
And that is a great start also to reply to your question, because on an EU level, if you want to really engage, it's good to understand who's responsible for what. Many times EU gets blamed for everything that is not working well, but
only by the Brits.
Yeah, well, not only the Brits. But what I would like to share with you is really the European Union is not a state. It's a union of member states who decide to join forces on certain topics, and they decide to address them on a union level. So in mobility, there are more and more topics emerging that we are actually getting the tasks to deliver. And certainly in this fast emerging technological development, we are really already deeply into the fourth industrial revolution. Things are happening so quick that one member state, no matter how big it is, cannot really manage and master all the challenges, especially not when we are trying to compete on a global scale as well. So for the mobility itself, it's of real importance that we identify soon enough where are the points where standardization needs to interfere, and where are the regulatory necessities in order to, first of all, support and curate the evolvement of new trends, or on the other hand, also ensure that we keep the level playing field, the competition alive, because it's so easy in a digital world to create monopolies, and we learned that. Of course, the future of open and democratic society is not in hierarchical monopolies, but it's in a dynamic, competitive environment where good ideas can really get through fast and in an effective way. And that is the responsibility of regulators. But at the same time, what we do, especially on EU level, we do try to engage as much as investment capacity in order to support these new emerging technologies, these new emerging business models, to be able to deliver them. And of course, you have to start with the infrastructure. Yeah? If you don't have an infrastructure, how are you going to move around? Even for drones and for airplanes, you need infrastructure. So that is one of our core goals, is that we ensure interoperable, multimodal, seamless infrastructure within EU. And the project that is one of the biggest projects and one of the flagship projects of EU is certainly this so-called 10T network, which is the core network that connects all member states within the same regulatory and standard framework. And the delivery time for completion of all these 9 corridors, bringing together railways, then roads, then maritime, inland waterways, aviation, is by 2030.
In essence, I mean, as you said, I would say it's fair to say that the EU overall is going through a bit of a complicated phase right now. But that means that your policy in transportation is quite physically bringing people in Europe closer together to counter that. Can you name the advantages that this will have when it's finished by 2030, a bit more concrete?
By all means. EU, one of the key reasons for EU to come together was really the motivation to ensure peace in EU. And connectivity means a way to connect, to cooperate, to engage. And if there is no connectivity, you cannot do that. So that is one of the driving forces. And of course, the implication that is very obvious is that only when we are fully connected, all member states can take a full advantage of a single market. More we have investments, especially public investments, in the basic infrastructure, being transport, energy, or telecommunications, more we see that GDP of member states is picking up. So I'm quite proud that in the last 3 years, the GDP of all member states have been growing. There was no negative sides. And of course, that also creates the opportunity for all new ideas, new technologies, to be able to take a full advantage of this single market and get the economy of volume and economy of scale, which of course is really important for competitiveness, not only within EU, but for the competitiveness globally.
Mr. Todd, I sense in your function you travel around quite a bit within Europe as well as abroad. Could you name the things you most notice within European transportation integration that are much better than with the rest of the world? And what is the one area you would wish for a better integration going forward?
I mean, clearly Europe is one of the best part of the world on road safety. You have some other countries which are very good. I mean, mainly Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea. They are at the level of European countries. And I mean, also in Europe, you have different levels. I must say Eastern Europe is not as good as Scandinavian countries who are the best in the class. And I must say UK is also a very good country. But clearly, you know, when we speak about road safety, we have the prescriptions. It's around education, around law enforcement, the level of the vehicles, and clearly, the Commission here has done one amazing job on making compulsory some use of electronic technology, for example, ESC, electronic stability control. I mean, everybody has that in a new car now in Europe. I mean, most of the people do not know they have it on their car, but I mean, it's absolutely sensational to improve, because that means it does not allow your car to skid, you know. And unfortunately, the cars which are sold in developing countries are very often the cars which are forbidden in European countries, or who do not have access to all those technologies. Road infrastructure also are very poor in developing countries compared to European countries, and the post-crash care. And clearly, I go back on enforcing regulations, simple things like buckling your safety belt, wearing one helmet, speeding, text driving, drink driving, which is mainly well enforced and implemented in European countries. I mean, is not in developing countries. And if it will be done as it is in our countries, you will immediately divide by 2 the number of victims on the roads.
maybe I can put this in a broader perspective, because what Mr. Todd just explained, it fits really well in the key priorities and key goals that we have, because we need to take on board also responsibility. Transport is an incredible area to engage with, but it has negative externalities. Yeah? And 3 major goals on EU level that we want to ensure is to boost the efficiency of logistic networks and interconnectivity for passengers, then connectivity within EU and globally, but the third one is to bring negative externalities down. And next, I will share with you a number which is really shocking. Negative externalities in EU altogether result in 1,000 billion euros per year, which is almost 70% of our GDP. So can you imagine investing that in new technologies, in startups, in innovation, in social frameworks? I can. And I would like to make sure that this money is available to be placed better for the social benefits and for the societal benefits. So what we are doing is now we are addressing these negative externalities in a very systemic manner. One is pollution. European transport is the second biggest polluter, 24%. The second one is congestion. Jean-Claude was stuck for 45 minutes in traffic today. I was more lucky because I came from different direction, so my access was much smoother. But we lose incredible amount of effective hours that we could use for much better cause than for being stuck in the traffic. So that's our big motivation to bring new technologies on board to serve a better management of the traffic. And the third one is really horrible statistics on European fatalities and serious injuries. If we are, in fact, the best in the world, but I would not be really proud on 25,000 fatalities and 137,000 seriously injured. So this comes together, and that's why we are so eager to engage with new technologies.
Now, you mentioned pollution, but you didn't mention emissions.
Yes.
In our view, possibly the biggest challenge for European transportation over the coming 20 to 30 years is to bring down emission levels in road transport, air transport, in shipping. To achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, European transportation would need to be carbon neutral by 2050.
Yes.
How does that look like?
Well, first of all, we need to become aware of the negative externalities we caused, because EU's development is very much based on creating these negative effects. So now I'm really happy that awareness is coming forward, and there is no doubt anymore that, at least in Europe, we know that we need to take care of the environment and climate change, and seriously. Because not only because of the planet, because planet will survive without us, but it's because of us, humans. If we want to be part of this evolution of this planet, we need to take care of it better, that we have conditions to live. And how did we react? I think I need to prompt to a very important document that was just issued before COP24, which is a clean planet for all, where Commission was very clear in setting the strategic orientation of new economical model for EU, which will be based on sustainable development and circular economy, with a clear vision zero about where we would like to deliver vision zero in pollution and emissions, actually negative externalities by 2050. That gave a very predictable framework of 30 years to everyone. Listen, get engaged, and we need to start delivering on that. So we have targets and clear goals by 2030. We know today how to deliver this ambitious goal, Vision Zero, in 60%. So in the next 30 years, we will be looking for the remaining 40%, how to get there. But I am optimistic because I see what's happening. You know, today we've been talking already about these emerging new technologies that will be electric or climate neutral, but I see skepticism on your face.
No,
let's see.
I'm a big believer that we'll make it happen, but I mean, we have to be honest. Getting to zero will mean more or less full electrification of passenger transport. It will mean things like catenary electric trucks, fuel cell trucks. It will mean synthetic fuels, which are very expensive for aviation, for shipping. I think we need to be honest to ourselves that this will mean that transportation, because internalize the externalities will become more expensive. Now there are a number of suggestions out there how policy can support this development. I read that one of the candidates for parliamentary president suggested that we ban short-range flights. Not sure whether that's the right direction to go, but what do you think are the largest levers that the EU can put in place to ensure that this transition accelerates and that nation states need to put in place?
I think I can be very concrete on that one. We have 3 pillars within which we are now decarbonizing transport, and we're pulling along also energy and digital sector because, of course, these 3 infrastructures are now very much working together very closely, and the next financial period will even prove that because there will be co-financed projects where all 3 infrastructures will be addressed as in a synergetic way. So first one is vehicles. You see that there is a lot of happening now on a level of vehicles, but I'm not saying only about personal vehicles, cars. I'm also talking about new generation of airplanes where we see the emergence of hybrid engines, which will be a big step forward. We see emergence of biofuels, real biofuels, and we see the emergence of electric trains everywhere. Currently, the cargo in Europe is already carried by electric trains in over 90% of the times. That doesn't mean that all railways electrified, but those the sections that matter, they are electrified. So we see the same move now in maritime. We reached really a remarkable global agreement in maritime where they committed to drop 50% by 2050 with the knowledge of today, and with the revision clause in 2030 that they can get to close to Vision Zero with the technologies that they will be known by then. So in aviation, we reached a really historical global agreement within the United Nations as well to offset all the growth from 2021. So there are many other areas where we can use them in order to get to Vision Zero. First is to ensure alternative infrastructure and alternative fuels and energies from the renewable sources. Where is the problem there? No storage capacity and a wrong type of batteries on the market. So that's why EU is now investing. One of the biggest investment R&D projects will be in the new energy storage capacities and in the new generation of batteries, which will be dual stream batteries, recyclable and non-lithium based, which means we can all of a sudden use the network as a storage device. So again, this challenge looks a little bit smaller than at the beginning. But I believe that there is the third element that will play an extremely important role, which is new organization of transport. I'm talking about sharing models, collaborative models, public transportation, taking over the major flows of traffic and mostly use then the personal mobility for the last kilometer, which means maybe last 20, 30 kilometers or the last real kilometer. But what also you ask is how we're going to really deliver all these goals at the end. Yes. All this comes together through regulatory interventions and investments. 60% of the next budget 21-27 in EU will be for green transport. I think that will give a strong push. So then we will have 22 more years, 23 more years to continue this very ambitious push. I believe in Vision Zero, and we worked with the team very, very hard to set the good seeds for the next commission and the commissions that come afterwards, that they can really follow up with this Vision Zero. But we need everybody on board. We need everybody on board, because if people will not continue to push the manufacturers and industry and show the interest, and if the regulators will not continue to do their job, and if public service providers will not continue to do their job, we will fail. But I have faith in humanity. We want to survive. right? So I do hope that ecosystem will continue to stay engaged, that we will continue to cooperate and deliver what we have to deliver in order to be a really prosperous part of this beautiful planet Earth.
Thank you. We will revisit that. I'd now like to transition into the second part of our discussion, which will focus very specifically on urban mobility. You experienced the challenges with this this very morning, as I heard. What I would like to discuss with you, with three other guests, is very specifically how do we envision urban mobility will look like going forward, and there we revisit this. How can we make sure it doesn't emit? And before I ask our other guests on stage, I'll maybe transition in with a question that may solve the challenge that he faced this morning. I read that the EU very specifically has started an initiative on urban air mobility. Could you give us a taste of what we can expect there, and when we will be able to move vertical in inner cities?
Well, there are two really, actually one really exciting strategy with already concrete action plans emerging. That is the transition towards connected, cooperative, automated and autonomous mobility. And one new area, new aspect in this overall ecosystem are, of course, remotely piloted aircrafts and drones. And I'm very proud on all our stakeholders, and because they were very engaging in preparing already the full-fledged European-based regulatory framework for the use of drones, which was published last September. In the next couple of days, we will publish the implementing rules. There are 7 test beds going on around EU where different concepts of the use and management of public space is going on, where we are really learning by doing and learning what else needs to be addressed in order to open the European market for the drone services. I do believe that by the end of the year, we will be able to make some interesting announcements. But
when will we see the first drones here in Berlin?
Well, I have a bet with stakeholders that by the end of my mandate, I will fly with one of them from point A to point B, even if it's only 10 meters. But to get a vertical takeoff, move and get a vertical landing. So it's a competition going on. Who will be the first to deliver that? So I have confidence in the companies that one of them will deliver.
And for full transparency, the end of her term is in 6 months.
Yes.
So that means very soon. Thank you.
But let me mention also another part, which I'm sure my colleagues will then address as well. Equally exciting to this autonomous concept of airspace, urban aviation space called U-space, is also autonomous land mobility, where we see a huge transition and a really good interoperability and multimodality between public transport, which we hope to be rail, and that is the answer to your previous question. Yes, we do want to have high-speed rail connections up to 500-600 kilometers. And of course, then there will be no need for regional aviation. Like today, nobody thinks to fly from Brussels to Paris or to London anymore. We all take Eurostar. Yeah, the same applies to Amsterdam, and we've heard that maybe Berlin will be connected soon. So that's a great news. And then in urban mobility, really use all these exciting gadgets, e-scooters, e-bikes, walking zones, classical bikes, and shared cars and shared vans. So all this will be primarily used in urban mobility of the future with a very well designed traffic management tools, where hopefully we will be avoiding the congestions to a certain point. I cannot promise Vision Zero for congestion by 2050.
Thank you very much.